KJA Global Channel. The Political System and Me. Series 6, The Civic Covenant for Future Generations. Episode 59, The Non-Repetition Covenant, What We Must Never Allow Again. A nation can survive violence and still die. It dies when violence becomes normal. A nation can survive oppression and still lose. It loses when oppression becomes just how things are. When we speak of Myanmar's system change revolution, we must speak not only of victory. We must speak of prevention. The most tragic outcome is not only that we suffer. The most tragic outcome is that we suffer and then repeat the same cycle under different faces, different flags, and different excuses. This is where our question begins. Before this becomes an institutional question, it becomes a human experience. Convert memory into structural guarantees by identifying warning signs, institutional reforms, accountability mechanisms, education, and preservation duties. History is full of nations that overthrew a tyrant and then became tired. They wanted peace so desperately that they accepted impunity. They wanted stability so urgently that they tolerated old networks. They wanted unity so badly that they swallowed silence. Then, slowly and quietly, the system returned. The system is not only a person. The system is a habit written into institutions. The revolution must therefore end with a covenant. Not a slogan. A covenant is deeper. A covenant is a national vow. Never again. Never again will power be allowed to operate without limits. The system reveal is structural guarantees of non-repetition. Non-repetition requires redesigning the conditions, institutions, incentives, and memory systems that once enabled abuse. In plain language, the hidden mechanism is structural guarantees of non-repetition. Non-repetition means redesigning conditions so that past abuses cannot return. It does not mean merely removing abusers. It names what must never recur. Armed force owning political authority. Impunity. Corruption. The punishment of truth. Denied belonging. Unlimited emergency power. Indoctrination. Dehumanization. Citizens reduced to subjects. This episode is the non-repetition covenant, what we must never allow again. Democracy is not built only by creating new institutions. It is also built by preventing old abuses from becoming possible again. A covenant of non-repetition is a contract of memory. Memory is the guardrail of the future. Non-repetition is not optimism. Non-repetition is design. It means we do not rely only on good leaders. We rely on systems that restrain even bad leaders. The test of a system is not how it behaves under saints. The test is how it restrains predators. Trust human dignity. Verify power. Never again will armed force own political authority. Never again will crimes be erased by rank, uniform, or political bargaining. Non-repetition does not mean endless revenge. It means lawful accountability. No one is above the law. The analytical center of this episode is the accountability chain. Authority. Duty. Record. Oversight. Answer. Correction. Consequence. Each arrow asks a different accountability question. Who authorized the decision? Who had the duty to act? What record should exist? And what institution can correct failure? A broken outcome may begin far upstream. The visible harm can come from an unjust rule, an unfunded institution, a hidden record, a captured oversight body, or a remedy that exists only on paper. The chain prevents us from reducing a system failure to one personality. It identifies the point where law, capacity, evidence, oversight, or enforcement stopped working. When citizens and professionals can locate that break, criticism becomes more accurate and reform becomes more practical. For this episode, the principal mechanism is structural guarantees of non-repetition. The production graphic must make every link readable on a phone screen and must label country-specific or proposed arrangements honestly. Under dictatorship, the non-repetition covenant is shaped by concentrated command. Information is restricted. Institutions answer upward. Challenge may carry personal risk. Records may be hidden or destroyed. Official memory may be controlled. Victims may be silenced. Security institutions may protect themselves from scrutiny. Under such a system, repetition is not an accident. It is built into the structure. In a fragile democracy, formal rules may exist while patronage, unequal capacity, corruption, politicization, or weak enforcement make protection inconsistent. Truth mechanisms may exist without access to records. Courts may exist without independence. Victims may be invited to speak without receiving protection. Reform may be promised without changing incentives or command structures. In a functioning federal democracy, authority is constitutionally distributed, common rights remain enforceable, and more than one institution can question, review, or correct harmful power. Public records are preserved. Independent bodies can investigate. Courts can impose lawful consequence. Federal and regional institutions share responsibility. Victims and affected communities can participate safely. Education and public memory protect society from denial. Comparison is a method of judgment, not a slogan or ranking exercise. The viewer should compare who decides, how authority was obtained, whether records are public, whether affected people participate, and whether guarantees of non-repetition are available in practice. Democratic design must survive weak leaders, political disagreement, and changes of government. The minimum guardrails are these. 1. Victim participation and protection. Victims, survivors, witnesses, families, displaced communities, and affected groups must be able to participate safely and with dignity. Participation must not expose people to retaliation, forced disclosure, or political exploitation. 2. Independent truth and investigative mechanisms. Truth-seeking institutions need access to records, professional independence, credible procedures, witness protection, and authority to publish findings. Truth without evidence becomes narrative. Evidence without protection can endanger lives. 3. Fair criminal accountability with due process. Serious crimes require lawful investigation, independent prosecution, fair trial, reliable evidence, and proportionate consequence. Accountability must reject both impunity and revenge. 4. Reparations and institutional reform. Repair may include restitution, rehabilitation, recognition, compensation, memorialization, and reform of the institutions that enabled abuse. A payment without reform can become silence. Reform without repair can ignore human suffering. 5. Guarantees of non-repetition. Laws, constitutions, professional standards, education, archives, civilian control, oversight, and public habits must work together to prevent the return of abuse. These safeguards operate as a system. A published rule without an independent reviewer can become theater. Oversight without records cannot see. Participation without safety can expose people. And a remedy without enforcement does not repair the harm. Global relevance. The institutional test for a non-repetition covenant applies across political labels. Who decides? What limits power? What information is public? Who participates? And does a real correction or remedy exist? Myanmar relevance. Apply the lesson without treating one organization, community, armed actor, institution, or proposed arrangement as the whole country. Separate existing law and institutions from interim or aspirational designs. Distinguish verified facts from allegations, political claims, historical interpretation, and proposed reform. Protect civilians and sensitive identities. Represent ethnic nationalities, regions, victims, survivors, and institutions with accuracy, dignity, and agency. Here is the civic practice for this episode. See and ask. Choose one item from the never again list that is most at risk in your context. Verify. Examine past patterns, warning indicators, constitutional safeguards, institutional protections, accountability records, education systems, archives, and preservation duties. Act. Choose one never again risk. Identify the law, institution, professional practice, memory safeguard, and public habit needed to prevent it. Review. Record whether you can name the responsible institution, the evidence, the safeguard or remedy, and one safe next step. The measure of success is not visibility. It is whether you can identify evidence, responsibility, a safeguard, and the safest next action. When future leaders are tempted to centralize, censor, steal, intimidate, or dehumanize, this covenant must rise like an alarm in the national conscience. Never again. Not in our name. Not in our future. That is how a revolution becomes a durable democracy. That is how suffering becomes a boundary. That is how memory becomes protection. And that is how Myanmar's system change struggle becomes not only a fight for today, but a promise to the generations to come. The principle to carry forward is this. Non-repetition requires redesigning the conditions, institutions, incentives, and memory systems that once enabled abuse. Ask yourself, what part of the guarantees of non-repetition have I treated as normal even though it should be visible, answerable, and correctable? The system shapes our lives. Our participation shapes the system. Subscribe. Learn. Participate. Shape the future. KJA Knowledge justifies authority.